Danger. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Self-Perfected.
Hey, all right. New year, new me.
Oh yeah, it is New Year.
Yeah. Got any big New Year's resolutions, Cameron? You gonna live your life differently?
Yeah, I've resolved myself to not be a loser.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Now it's 2022, so it's kind of like the future. You know what I mean? I feel like.
Well, I remember 2020. We were saying this is like the year of clear vision, and then all of a sudden everything became obvious that we live in a very corrupt world.
Yeah, but it's like now, like I don't know if you had this when you were a kid, but I always felt like when you're getting to the 2000s, like the date, it was like, oh, it's gonna be so crazy. It's gonna be like we're in the year 2000 something. Like it sounds like the future to me. But now we're in 2022, so we're well into it. And now we got the metaverse and everything that we imagined would possibly happen. Like, think about it. Everything you could possibly imagine, I guess, except for flying cars, although technically
Hey,
those
they're working on
exist.
that hardcore. Do you know the guy
Yeah.
who is behind making Amazon Prime a thing? Jeff Holden. He's the guy now tasked. He works with Uber now, and he's the main guy who's in charge of getting flying cars to be as easy to get a flying car as a normal Uber. And they're rolling it
Interesting.
out in LA and Dallas are the first cities. Yeah.
Really?
So
So
that'll
that's
be a
like a
thing.
real thing they're actually doing.
Yeah, it's called EVTOL, EVTOL. It's like electronic vertical takeoff, something.
I feel more comfortable if they would also put the and landing in the name.
No. And if you conceal carry in this, or
That's how they disappear people. They just
yeah.
send a Uber to them and there's no landing part. They just take off.
They just go to the Bermuda Triangle.
Like, see what happens. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I think
So
about
how
that
was
a
your
lot.
weekend?
Well, I think about this a lot. I'm curious if the listeners think about this too. Is when there's that self-driving cars, like, are you gonna really get in that thing? Like
Trust it?
yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's like, do you really want to trust it? And they can say like, oh, they're safer, they're more reliable than people. And it's like, that's true.
But what if your
maybe
social
from a
credit score
statistical
isn't very good?
Well, and also from a statistical perspective, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? But like, how many people, like, think about it. Let's say you're a person who never got into a fatal accident or never caused a fatal accident. How is it safer than you?
Right.
It's only safer than the actual individual people who fuck up. You know what I mean? Or where, and I can understand in the case of like some kind of act, like random thing where it could have saved you. That's pretty cool. But maybe they could just turn on in those events or something. I don't know. But yeah, it is. Of course, they're like, well, but then you can't drive 300 miles per hour if it's under human control. I'm like, well, maybe that's a good thing. You should be going 300 miles per hour. But yeah, that's the bigger point too, is like, what happens when it's all hooked up to a system that's like, instead of getting banned from Twitter, you just get banned from reality.
Yeah.
Just like, boop.
Yeah, I'm reading that book. I don't know if you recommended it or someone else, but it's called Future Proof by Kevin Ruse. He's like some writer, used to be some for the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or something. And
actually, no, I was thinking of Future Shock, so I don't think I've read that one.
Yeah. It's like brand new. Like, he's even talking about COVID-19 in it and everything. He was saying how he goes to Davos and he talks like at the World Economic Forum, and he'll attend the talks during the day. And it's all like peachy and inspiring, like, oh, humanity 4.0, whatever. And then he says after the sun goes down and they all go to the bars and the parties and stuff, he's like disturbed by well, it wasn't necessarily he's disturbed, you can tell in his writing. He's also like trying to be an optimist, but he talks to this one guy. He's the CEO of Infosys, which is it's like massive company out of India that basically creates automation systems for these huge companies like Goldman Sachs, that level. And he was watching this guy get grilled by all these, business owners and like the C-level people. And they're just grilling him because he said about 2 years ago, the whole theme was, let's find a way to just, automate like that 5%, you know, and then have the humans still be like 95% there. So automation just kind of
Mhm.
helps. He's like, in the past year, it's taken a stark turn for them to basically say, like, how do we literally automate 99% of our workforce? Like they don't
Hmm.
care at all about the human. So it's coming.
Think about it. We're ahead of the curve. Like we, in terms of
Mhm.
Technotier, what we've been presenting to people and
Mhm.
explaining to them what's coming. We're like
Yeah.
ahead of the curve, and they're not even talking about. They just started talking about it in Davos.
Right.
It's like,
Right. Yeah.
huh,
Yeah. I mean, I remember that from the first time I met you guys in Denver. And I was
yeah,
like looking at at TechnoTutor as well as the business behind it. And it was like what I had been, because I had that fear for a long time of like, we're gonna get automated at some point. I was thinking it's like 30 years out. Then you
yeah.
guys presented me the statistics, the stuff from The Economist, just what Bill Gates is talking about. I'm like, holy shit, this is gonna happen really soon. And like, what does that mean for cities, for example? Like that was a
Mm,
huge reason why I became a distributor. Because I see the city I live in, I see the fact that no one's prepared for this, that you know, if even if 50% of people get automated in the next 5 years, 10 years, that's a lot of people getting really desperate. It's a lot of people going crazy, you know, knocking on your door, either wanting to take their anger out or wanting to get your food or all the above. Like that's it's unacceptable. So
mm,
that was a huge reason why I became a distributor actually. So anyway,
mm.
so no.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty interesting now because we wouldn't have seen that the pandemic would accelerate everything,
Mm-hmm.
which really shows the real nature of it. You know, like there's this book. I think I might. No, I don't have it up there yet. I think I was gonna put it up here, but we've talked about it before. That author Baudrillard,
Mm-hmm.
he wrote that book called Simulacra and Simulation. It's the one referenced in the first Matrix,
Mm-hmm.
um, and which is kind of interesting, you know, because you know how they're like, oh, it was really a story about trans, da 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 da. Like, okay, well, explain that part then. Explain the part where you had that book in as a reference, okay? Because the whole point there is that you can create an idea of something as a simulation, but it's not the real thing. But then it takes a life of its own.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at that point in relation to the pandemic, how you can like I was kind of skimming through it, you know, when I saw it on my bookshelf and I was planning on what books to bring here to the office, and I was kind of skipping through it, and I just came across this one part that was talking about it was specifically talking about disease, and it was saying it was talking about like people who, it was talking about the difference between a simulation and a what was the other word he used? I can't remember at the moment. But there's a difference between something like he said, faking an illness versus simulating an illness. That was what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, he's saying like you can call in sick and be like, oh, you know, I'm sick today or whatever, and they're like, okay, fine, but you're just like faking it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus he said, but what do you do with the person who exhibits actual symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we have this thing going on right now with the whole pandemic where all of the signs are there that it's actually happening, even though it's like happening on TV. And doesn't mean people aren't getting sick, but it's not the thing that it's being promoted as. It's being twisted. But to some people, it's a real thing. To others, it's not a real thing. Do you know what I mean? And you can, and the fact that you can even experience it differently. Like I was thinking about it because I was watching Tim Pool this morning, or when I was like getting ready to come over here, and he was talking about, he made this point about, oh yeah, that's where I was going to talk to you about that, about Joe Biden just signed off on some kind of deal for some production of some drug or something like that. Some deal with some drug company or something, but it won't go into production until 2024. And he was like, hey, he was like saying like, this is never going to end. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And they were saying
like a COVID related drug.
Yeah, something to do with
Okay.
exactly with COVID. Yeah.
Oh.
And I forget what exactly it was,
Yeah.
but it was like it wasn't going to happen until 2024. And then there was that thing about Australia where in the beginning they had signed off on all those buildings they were going to have, and they weren't even going to get created until like the third quarter of 2022. You know, it's like, what the hell? But what was I going to say about that? No, I lost my train of thought on that point. But anyways,
That's in business. We call that a perpetual cash cow. It
yeah, exactly.
really is, right? They're just selling fear, and then they're selling the antidote to the fear, which is actually just a bunch of bullshit.
But you look at
Making money.
what I was going to say earlier was how you look at how all of that pushes people into the metaverse. You see
Yeah.
what I mean? Like the pandemic was the point of shutting all the businesses down so that the bigger businesses could gobble up all of that.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because like people have talked about it's not like something I'm just saying that's new, but they shut down the mom and pop stores, but Walmart stays open.
Mhm.
And think about the logic of that, because it really doesn't make logical sense that that big building where everybody's going into one place. Everyone knows this, and people have been talking about it. When you really look at it, it's like, and then they would say, oh, well, science has shown that in those places, it's fine. And you're like, so the science is being used on purpose to justify decisions.
Exactly.
That's why they don't want any dissent.
Mhm.
You see what I mean? It's so obvious. It's like they're channeling the science into what they wanted to say to justify the decisions they're making. So the science is like retroactive, if that makes sense. It's more
Yeah.
like, okay, find the science to justify what we need to do here. And then they shut everybody else down. And then that allows the companies like Walmart and Costco to get all that competition, because once you get used to shopping at those stores, why ever go back?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like now I've figured out all the things I need to buy and where they are and everything. I've changed my pattern, so
Mhm.
I don't need to go and shop at this other place anymore. So then you have all these people, like you were saying, who are going to be unemployed, have no businesses and so forth. So what are they supposed to do? And then you also have the point of pushing everybody into online shopping and everything, and getting everything online, all of that even more. And it just pushes everybody to staying home, being online, getting all your information from online. And now they figured out how to do all of the entertainment online, because that was another thing.
Mhm.
People wanted to go to the movie theaters. But wouldn't it make more sense for you to release a movie in the metaverse? Then you could literally have every single person on the planet hypothetically watch it at one time. Versus having to distribute it to a movie theater. You have to pay them for it. You have to have all of that stuff. And so you could just cut all that out, but they had to like shut it all down. They had to change people's behavior patterns because people liked going to the movie theaters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
now
you
they're
just see
afraid
all
of it.
these things that, right, exactly. You see all these things happen where people are now shifting their behavior patterns to be more in line with just going into an online virtual world.
Mhm.
And then you see like the level at which those who are participating at the high levels in the system are willing to manipulate information, manipulate people. I mean, don't you think that's just going to continue in the metaverse? Do you know what I mean? And I just saw, actually, Katie was telling me about this guy. Did you hear about this guy, Robert Malone? He's a doctor.
Yeah.
And he was one of the guys who was behind the mRNA technology.
Mhm.
He was on Joe Rogan.
Didn't he just get banned from Twitter?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, I just saw that today. I guess that happened a few days ago or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm assuming that was before or after he went on Joe Rogan. Do you know? I'm
I don't
assuming
know.
it was after.
Probably
Okay.
after.
I'm
Yeah.
assuming it was after. Yeah. But
I didn't even know
it's just-
I didn't listen to him on Joe Rogan yet. There's another guy, Dr. Peter McCullough, who was on Joe's show like 3 weeks ago or something.
Yeah.
And that one, I had a lot of people I haven't talked to in a long time. They sent me that. They're like, hey, this is really disturbing. Like, I didn't like, have you seen this? I was like, oh, good. You're questioning things too. So yeah, it's so tough because it's like, is there really a silent majority of people that are questioning this stuff? I don't know. But that's also the cool thing is we don't necessarily need a majority right now.
Right.
We just
Well, the
need
majority
that.
doesn't. The majority is. It's like you're never going to have a majority at the moment. I mean, yeah. Okay. Let's say you have a majority of people questioning things. Well, what do they question?
Right.
Are they just questioning the pandemic? Because if you're just questioning that, but you're not questioning your fucking belief in God, I mean,
Right.
you know what I mean? How much are you really questioning? Like, think about all the people who questioned the system, the two-party system, and voted for Trump, and then fell and like bought into all the QAnon stuff.
Yeah.
Because it was like playing on the point of God and Trump being ordained by God and all this shit. You know what I mean? So it's like, unless you question everything, it doesn't really matter. And the thing is, if you're just relying on the system and little things here and there, you're never really going to question everything.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
so that's to your point. Like, really, we just have to find that minority who really stands up, because then that minority can create systems that will wake everybody up.
Mm.
You see what I mean? Because that's the
Mm.
problem right now, is like, if it's just the system doing it, it's never going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of how I see self-perfected, at least initially, was like,
Mhm.
I just saw enough of what you were saying and what like Kian was saying and Avery and Drake and everything. And I was like, okay, we got to like get this into like a outlet and then like push it out systematically. So that's been cool to see. I mean, you know, but this is still just the infancy of what self-perfected is, as well as these other systems too. So,
Oh,
yeah.
I remember I was going to say
Mhm.
about, or when I was talking about automation and stuff earlier, was I was thinking about how my daughter Seneca, like, she's now 3. She turned 3 at the beginning of October. How, because that point about Tim Pool saying like, you know, we've been in the pandemic. This has been going on now for 2 years. I guess it's like over 2 years, maybe, or it's almost 2 years. Is it almost 2 years, or
Yeah.
2020? I
Well,
guess almost 2 years.
almost
It'll
2
be
years.
2 years pretty soon, right?
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about, like, man, my daughter, she's 3. So basically, in terms of how old she is now,
Wow.
more than half of her life, almost 2/3 of it, has been existing in this pandemic, where the world has shifted from one thing to a whole new thing. So like
Yeah.
that, I mean, and I can't say it doesn't affect her, you
Mhm.
know, but we have been able to, in a lot of ways, to sort of, as much as possible, not participate. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's not impossible, because obviously everyone's wearing masks. So imagine when she's, you know, 1.5 or whatever, like, she sees everyone wearing masks except us. You know what I mean? Like, that's got to imprint somehow, you know? And even in like for a whole year or something, for a long part of her life. So we don't participate in that, but, you know, it's still got to be in there somewhere. So it's, yeah, it's fascinating. And I mean, she's gonna, both of them obviously are growing up in a world where the metaverse is going to be taken for granted.
Right.
Whereas to us, it's a new thing. But imagine growing up in a world where that's normal, you know, having that. Then, I mean, to a certain degree, it's not that weird, because we grew up with the internet. Well, I mean, you did, I guess. I mean, I don't know if I would say I grew up with it, because, you know, even when I was in middle school, it was kind of like we had dial up.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like everyone was hanging out online all the time. It was more like, sort of, sometimes you were on there and most people weren't most of the time, you know?
Yeah.
But if you're born now, the internet at least is like everywhere. It's just
Right.
normal, you know, and then the metaverse will be like that too. So
Yeah, that's really wild. I mean, just looking at it, it's like people wearing masks. It's like Seneca can't see half their face.
mhm.
How the fuck is she supposed to relate to them relative to then you or when we come over, right? Or the other people who don't wear the masks. It's like just it's so obvious. And then you
Yeah.
get these people that are like, well, it's the only way to keep my child safe is if we're all wearing masks. I'm like, you don't
And then
understand reality.
they're doing all these studies where they're like, oh, masks don't work unless it's a very specific type and all this stuff. And you're like,
It's like that. It almost doesn't even matter to that person though, right? Because that person, they just get off on feeling like they're the good kid in class. It's like that same. It's like we're a bunch of adults. It's like we're childish little kids trapped in an adult body that just wants to appease the authority. That's like, yes, teacher, I did my homework. I'm telling on him. And that's like how at least a lot of people I see are walking around.
I agree. Like, you see that, how it's kind of like I get to boss you. I mean, I see that it's like with the flight attendants on the flights. That's kind of what I see, is like finally they get their chance to like really be assholes and get away with it or something.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting times. So
Hey, I saw on your Facebook right before we started recording, you guys went out to eat over the weekend.
Oh yeah. We had
Tell me about that.
Jam-packed weekend with awesome things. We had a clubhouse on New Year's Day. That was awesome. Had one of the biggest turnouts we've ever had, and really good, just in terms of like goal setting, practicality. And then we got this whole new wave of people coming in. One guy in particular, this was so good. This one guy, he comes in and he's talking about how he does like emotional intelligence consulting for the city. So he has like contracts with different cities to go in and teach the workers with their emotions, self-awareness, stuff like that. And he's cool. Like he didn't come in trying to like teach us a lesson. He's like, hey, this is just what I do. I find my
Yeah.
purpose in it. But you could tell he's like, he wants more.
Mhm.
And I chatted with him for a bit. He's a very interesting guy. Chatted with some other people, and then by the end, he had chatted with Pedro, and Pedro just told him a little bit about TechnoTutor and everything that we do. And he comes up to me. He's like, Mitch, he's like, are you part of this TechnoTutor thing too? He's like, how do I see it? He's like, Pedro's gonna show me on Monday, but he's like, if this thing is what you guys are saying it is, he's like, this is literally exactly what I need. Because he saw for
Yeah.
himself, right? He has like 30 different contracts with businesses and government agencies and stuff, but he has to be the guy in the room teaching them stuff. And he knows 98% of them don't want anything to do with him. But he's like, wow, if this thing can actually change people and it can be there when I'm not there, he's like, this is the missing key. I'm telling him more. I'm telling him stories. I'm telling him about Max and Seneca, my change, Jessica's change, all that. He had 2 different times where he told me and he told Pedro, he's like, I think I'm going to cry right now. He's like, this is what I've been looking for. And it's so cool because you can tell the guy's been through a lot, like he's stressed and stuff, but you can tell he really cares about improving the world. So it's so awesome to show that to him.
Yeah. So he's kind of like a tutor in the sense that he's there to like teach people this, like the vocabulary of your emotions, how to deal with it and so forth. And I know you know this, I'm just saying for the benefit of people listening, but it's like, why is it that his approach will never work? And I don't even need to know what the approach is.
Yeah.
Right. Because like, so we don't know this technique or whatever. It won't work because, and it's not that it can't work with TechnoTutor. It's just that why it won't really fundamentally work until you have TechnoTutor incorporated is because you learn all of your emotional patterning and behavior in the first 7 years of your life.
Yeah.
And it gets ingrained as like things that you take for granted. You know, there's a lot of ways you can say that, but essentially it's things you're taking for granted. This is how you respond to situations. I'll give you an example. Like we went on vacation and there was some point where Max was playing with some kids and one of the kids was like whining a bunch to like try to manipulate the parents. And when we got home after our vacation, Max started doing this like whining thing, right? And I was looking at him like, hey, Max, why are you taking on that expression? Like, why? And he was like, well, I'm trying to get you to do whatever. And I'm like, but I need to, you know, that expression is not going to get me to change my decision, or it's not going to change what I'm saying or get me to do anything. Right. He's like, yeah. And I was like, where are you getting this from? Right. And he goes, oh, I downloaded it when we were in Florida. Right. So it was cool walking through that with him. Like Katie had a chat with him about it too and stuff. And now it's like, I don't see him doing it anymore. Right. Because at first he was like, well, I downloaded it, but I don't know how to get rid of it. That's what he said.
Oh,
right?
Interesting.
So we talked about it and everything, right? He has his TechnoTutor and all that. So it was really cool to see how, but he's still within that first 7 years, right? Yep. So it's like, he's a very quick learner because of that, because he uses TechnoTutor. So he can learn lots of things very quickly, right? But, you know, learning also can mean letting go and learning something new and doing it, you know, stopping doing something, right? So point is, well, it's not difficult. It's essentially impossible for adults to do that on any systematic scale. I'm not saying there aren't moments where an adult can change here and there, you know, or learn something new, but it'll always be in some very particular, you know, minute way, or, you know what I mean? Like a little, it's like almost like an exception rather than the rule.
Right.
Like without TechnoTutor.
And it's not like, without TechnoTutor, it's not like you're going to be able to reform your entire belief systems and personalities related to money or related to even your initial thought of like making money or spending money, much less like how you have your relationships, like with the intimate partner or your family or your community. There's so much in there.
Imagine the consultant, and I'm not trying to diss what this guy is doing because he's finding a place to go in and make money and help in the way he thinks he can. But imagine the emotional consultant, like that situation. You're just trying to teach, let's say, some employees in the city in this one particular area, how to be more emotionally sensitive, responsive, whatever, in a particular setting or context.
Mhm.
But it's like such a limited context. And yet that's not where, like, think about it. Your emotional response to situations is not compartmentalized.
Mhm.
You might try to, like, by suppressing, your desires and so forth when you're at work or whatever, or your personality, or shifting it or whatever. But all of that comes from when you were a small child. So trying to then affect it in that particular case by giving some, by trying to spend like even a few hours trying to teach them new ways of doing things or understanding when they're not even processing most of what you're saying. Think about it, just them having the vocabulary of how their mind works, everything, which is what's presented in Destiny and DIP, that alone would allow people to start being like, oh, like when I'm reacting to Sally at work, it's because I was relating it to blah, 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 blah. And that's where this feeling has come from and so forth. And I can forgive myself, like just having that alone.
Mhm.
But then obviously being able to integrate that vocabulary in a way where you can really process that. That's why you would need the Technotutor, because that's a vocabulary you never learned.
Yeah.
It just becomes, it's like when you study, like you studied psychology in university, right?
Mhm.
It's like when you study stuff, but it still remains theoretical.
Yeah.
Versus it becomes a part of you where you can actually do something about it. You see what I mean?
Interesting. I just realized right there that was so in my my junior year of university, I went to Brazil for like 6 months, because in part of that one, it was really, I was like, get me out of Minnesota. Like I grew up here my whole life. I want to go have some, experience totally outside my like everything I've known. But also I realized very quickly into that experience, it was like a real test for me to see how much of my psychology training could I actually apply. Like if like, can I regulate myself? Do I actually have emotional intelligence? Like, can I manage stress? Things like that. I learned very quickly, like the theory, there was little pieces here and there where I could like look at things in a little different way. But ultimately it's like the iceberg, right? You see the little bit on the surface. I'm like, oh yeah, I could kind of maybe change that. But underneath is like 95% of it. That's the stuff where it was still the same vices, the same characters, the same pettiness, the same back chat. It would come out, and that really showed me like, wow, I could literally change my entire environment, live in a totally new country, new language, new everything for like over half a year. And I still was basically operating with that same operating system.
Now imagine you took a child, instead of putting them in Minneapolis, you put them in that other culture.
Mhm.
That child's going to turn out very different.
Yeah.
Maybe not totally fundamentally, because there's a lot that's actually still the same, but generally speaking, they're going to be Brazilian or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
So that should tell a person, okay, there's a difference between the adult learning and the child learning.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the whole point about Technotutor is to put you back in that state where you're the child learning again. And that's why it's that missing key in all the situations, the emotional counseling, all that stuff. Because unless you're going back into that point and changing things at that level, it's just going to remain abstract, theoretical. And like, by the time you are in a situation talking to somebody and they're saying something that you're going to react to, if you're having to sit there and go, oh yes, it was Piaget's theory of da 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 da, and you're like trying to, okay, so therefore I must, like, you've already reacted. You've already not responded the way you were supposed to respond or whatever. So you can't be in a theoretical abstract knowledge base, right?
It literally makes just even more sense. Like I haven't actually really reflected on my journey of like learning psychology in air, saying that in air quotes for anyone listening. So I didn't learn it. I learned the academic, right? Which part of the definition of academic means theoretical and not practical. Because I remember study for hours, study for days on end for the test. And then, it's like, or even like something like therapy, right? Where you're sitting in a room talking about your problems. And then you go back to your same shitty life, getting the same arguments, all that. What at most, maybe one time, you don't react in the exact same way. You react in a little different way. Guess what? You're not dealing with the ultimate, underlying point of like, where did that come from? Which was in your childhood. How did you get imprinted on by the culture or other people? So That is, I mean, it's so obvious. I know that we see this, but it's like, I don't know how obvious it is for the average listener.
Well, how many times have you ever met? Well, rather than think of it like that, just think about it abstractly. Like, how many therapists are like still fucked up? Do you know what I mean? Like, think about, are there therapists who are alcoholics?
Yeah.
Are there therapists who are like addicted to stuff? Are there therapists who are like have terrible marriages and family lives and like their
Yep.
kids hate them? And I mean, and I knew this one, this psychiatrist. This was like probably about 10 years ago or so. And he was pretty well connected in where I lived in Houston, and would go on the talk shows in Houston, you know, like the local stuff and all that. So he was a pretty well established guy, and he had a big center that he ran. And I mean, he looked like Sigmund Freud. Like, it was weird. Like, he was like your typical, like what you would expect, like the typical male psychologist to be, right? And he lived in a really nice big house and everything. But he was kind of like, I'm not saying he was mean, but he wasn't like this really friendly, like nice guy. He was like kind of like a businessman. I mean, in terms of his persona, he was kind of like a little bit like of a ruthless businessman. And it's like, you just realize it wasn't because he was a good psychologist or psychiatrist that he was in that position. It was because he was really good at business. So he was like able to grow what he was doing. It wasn't because of results, because I knew people who went to that place and it was like, they were going for a long time and there was no difference. They like didn't change at all. The only thing that was happening is they were somewhat stabilized in a certain context because they were on medication, but it wasn't like an actual fix because the stabilization was still fucked up and dysfunctional, right? But I was thinking, I was curious, like, you know, what percentage of therapists and so forth are like divorced?
I guess it would be no different than the national average or whatever.
Well, it
maybe even more, because you know how that classic like idea of the partner of the psychologist is like, don't try that shit on me.
Oh, okay. So because I wasn't sure what the numbers were. The national average for all occupations is 16.96%. So all occupations, the divorce rate is 17%.
Really?
What does that mean though? Because I always heard that it was like half of all marriages end in divorce. Like, what does that mean?
Right.
Maybe you can look that up while we're
trust
divorce rates. But maybe it's like the way they're using the word divorce rate is like, it says, what is the divorce rate in America? It says it's about 15%. It depends on like how they're measuring things and so forth. It turns out, okay, so it says, so how many marriages end in divorce? As it turns out, the often cited statistic of 1 in 2 divorce rate was drawn from unreliable data that essentially renders it meaningless. So obviously it's going to come down to how they're measuring it and what they're defining it and so forth and everything, right? But it looks like the basic current accepted number is about 17%.
And so what I'm seeing here, I don't know exactly how accurate this is, but they're saying it's like 2.9 out of every 1,000 people get divorced, but that's 6.9 of every 1,000 people get married, right? Like if you were to take an average year, right? How many people out of total? So, you know.
So 2.9 out of 6.9, it's 3 out of 7. So, you know, what is that? Like 20% or something, or 30% or whatever it is, right? So, okay. So obviously you have to look at how many people actually get married. You can't just say like how many people out of everybody.
Right.
Okay, but this is interesting. So I'm just looking at it. It's saying that, well, they make an interesting point. Because I was just thinking, okay, why would a psychologist have any different level of divorce rate than anybody else?
Exactly.
Because you're thinking, oh, but they know how to deal with their problems. But our whole point is like, they don't know how to fucking deal with their problems. All they did was they went to school.
Yep.
And they learned a particular profession, but they're not, it's like if somebody was like a money manager, but they're not super rich.
Exactly.
I mean, they might be like kind of, they might have some money because they're in a profession that pays them well. But if they knew how to fucking manage money, they'd be a billionaire, wouldn't they? You know what I mean? Like if they really knew what they were doing, right? So my point is, like, they learned something and they're just applying it, right? They're not necessarily applying that in their own life. Because if you think about it, if you're a money manager, but you work for a company and get paid a salary, is my point. That's my point. Like, why would you be getting paid a salary?
Right. And so the whole point is, like, don't be duped by people. Do whatever their profession title is.
Exactly. Or it's like a teacher. Shit. They don't know anything.
Exactly.
You know, or the doctor. Like, they know what they were taught in school, but have you ever seen a doctor who was overweight, or a doctor who was unhealthy, or a doctor who died of a heart attack because they blah, 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 whatever? Okay, so check this out. The top 5 highest divorce separation rates by occupation. So this is just the first 5. What is a gaming cage worker? Gaming cage? I don't even know what that means. Is that like the guy who exchanges your money at the casino? I'm not sure what that means. Well, that's number 4. Number 5 is extruding and forming machine setters, operators and tenders, synthetic and glass fibers. What? This is very specific. Okay, but anyways, number 1 is dancers and choreographers.
Really?
Number 2 is bartenders. Number 3 is massage therapists. Wow. I'm like, that's pretty accurate. Dancers and choreographers have a divorce rate of 43%. That's interesting, because my mom was a dancer and she's been married like 9 times. She's bumping up the averages. Bartenders, massage therapists. It's like when you start thinking about the psychology of someone who would become a bartender. Mm-hmm. If that was like their long-term profession, you know what I mean? Right.
What is the purpose of a bartender? Is to feed people alcohol.
No shit.
Right. So they can just try and feel a feeling that's always going to be fleeting and leave their life worse off.
The 5 lowest is media and communication equipment workers. And all others that are in that. Yeah, not media like personalities, but equipment workers, media workers. Less than 1%.
Maybe they have agricultural very engineers. They probably have very, very low ambitions, you know, and so they just settle.
They're less than 1%. So agriculture engineers, less than 2%. Optometrists are pretty low. There was not a specific occupation listed as marriage and family therapist in that study. However, there were multiple occupations in which a marriage and family therapist may fall. So the highest, those top 5 was like 43 to 32%. And then like the lowest ones were like 1 to like 5%. So where do you think therapists and stuff fall? Like in the
closer to the higher. That would be my guess.
Right? You're talking about like psychologists are 20%. Yeah. Which is above the national average. Yeah. Social scientists, counselors, social workers, sociologists, all of them are occupational therapists are all above 20%. So all above the average. Right. So those are the people, even social workers, those are the people who are supposed to be out there helping people get their lives on track. And on average, they have higher rates of divorce. So what does that tell you? It's like they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Mm-hmm. They're just in a system, like following a system. It's not that they in themselves are actually stable and have something figured out. But what was really interesting in this is it said that study suggests that divorce rates were higher for occupations with higher numbers of African Americans and females, while rates were actually lower for occupations with higher numbers of Asian Americans and higher average incomes. Isn't that interesting? So it's almost like it's got nothing to do with the profession. It's just, you have people in there who culturally they stick with marriages or they don't stick with marriage. You see what I mean? It's got nothing to do with actual, what did you learn in the occupation, or can you apply it in your life? It's all just based on who's in the occupation and whether they were culturally reinforced to stay married or whatever, which comes down to your first 7 years.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Like it comes down to your culture, which is what's happening in the very, very beginning. So it makes sense why African-American women would be in those professions with higher rates of those people is going to be higher rates of divorce. And if you're Asian American and higher income, you're going to be in those professions are going to have lower rates of divorce because of two different cultures and two different income levels. Fascinating, huh?
Wow. Yeah.
Oh, how are you going to go into a situation and try to then teach people how to change it when you can see statistically? Because you would think, hey, if it's just based on people, it would all be equal, wouldn't it? It would all be the same numbers everywhere, but it's not, because you're bringing in your first 7 years into everything that you're doing, which is also determining what you're choosing for your career, everything. So if you're going into a place where there's a problem of emotional, lack of emotional intelligence, or whatever that means, then how are you going to change that if you're not changing the first 7 years of a person's life? If you're not changing the context that they formed their memories in, the patterning that they developed as a result of that, because you're not talking to a 4-year-old child anymore, where you can change at a physical cellular level what they believe and what they think and everything. And then you think about what we are doing to kids at that age. The lies that we're telling them, the bullshit that we're feeding them. Right? What were you going to say?
It's just so much of like really seeing the reality that we're in is like the average person that just goes through life and gets their job, whatever. They just never fucking question any of this. And then they just get swindled into it, and they're just like going around like a brainwashed zombie. And so that's like the task at hand is just so epic of what we're doing, because it's getting to the reality of things, which the reality has been so suppressed forever. So
I want to show you something real quick. You're gonna love this. Let me see if I can share.
Yeah, will you share the screen?
Okay.
Let's see. I got shit.
Okay. It was like one of the related items or whatever on that article I was looking at.
For anyone who's just listening, Cameron just pulled up an article that says, "Can you develop psychosis ever after having COVID-19?"
But the punchline is the picture. It's the guy, I guess, waiting for an appointment, maybe for a psychologist or something, but he's wearing a mask. And so to me, like, that's the fucking psychosis. Like, can you develop? Yeah, like you're wearing a mask fucking everywhere because you're fucking paranoid.
What is COVID psychosis? Oh my gosh, this is so ridiculous. Is depression a symptom of COVID-19? You see that other one on the side?
Yes.
Yeah, it's related. Yeah. It's like, no shit.
There may be a link between COVID-19 and symptoms of depression.
If y'all can't see that, this is a giant fucking. And this is like Central. This is like one of the main websites for all the, psychologists of the world.
There's some indication there may be a link between the disease and symptoms of depression. And they're like, well, it could cause blood clots. And it's like, okay, yeah, maybe there's some points where, if you get sick or the virus can mess with certain things and you can't process certain nutrition and all that. But isn't it far more likely that because of the quote response to this virus, like we've totally fucked up everyone's lives and their sense of like what is real and stable. And now people have, I'm not defending anything because it's like, I don't want to defend the old normal. Because you have all these people who are like, we just need to go back to the way things were. And it's like, that's so dumb.
Right.
Like the way things were, if this could disrupt, like if coronavirus or the pandemic, whatever you want to call it, can come in and disrupt your life from the perspective of your sense of well-being, right? What does that tell you about the way things were before? Like, it wasn't real. We don't have a world where everybody has a guarantee for what they need, because if so, this wouldn't have caused a problem. That's, you know what I mean? Like we wouldn't have had a world where people are now depressed all of a sudden because they can't go to sports matches or fucking go to concerts or whatever. Like then that means that it wasn't real, because it's like I just look at like my children, and they're at home right now like playing, and they can go and run around and do fun stuff on our property. They can also go around and be around other people too. But it's like, why aren't we creating a world where no matter what's going on, you're enjoying yourself? Oh, like Avery made this really great point. I think it was Sam the other day when he said, we have this one day, Christmas, where we get these warm feelings and we're giving to each other and everything's great, right? Why isn't it like that every day?
Exactly.
Why aren't we like that every day? And when you listen to Your Wish Is Your Command, what does KT say? He says, when you're in that state of creating and being successful and you're focused on it and you're actually in the sweet spot and all of that, every day feels like Christmas morning. Right. And what is Christmas? I mean, you can think of it from a financial perspective. When you're rich as fuck, every day is like Christmas because you can just buy anything you fucking want anytime. Like there's never any limit where you're like, I can't do that right now. And, and I mean, there's always going to be some delay in things potentially, because like if you want to build a house, like a really nice big house, like it can't just suddenly appear one day.
Right.
It's going to take time, but you can enjoy that process of building it. And that's part of it. Right. So, but at the same time, imagine the person who's like, I can never have that house. Those are two different types of delay. You know what I mean?
Right. That's fascinating because like, so we were talking about this yesterday on the parenting call, how the big push toward the metaverse, and then how there's companies like BlackRock and, all these other like major companies that are out now buying up real stuff in the real physical world. And that's something that it's like that feeling that you're talking about of when you have the money, you have the ability, and you're creating something for real. In reality, it's like this, it's this real feeling in a sense of like genuine excitement, and it's kind of fun. It's kind of how I look at like building the clubhouse. Like I know every week there's going to be a few more people, a few new people, or it might be a huge influx, right? Or it's one week, it's the same amount of people, but it's like this, I get this genuine enjoyment out of like, who's going to be here today? Whose life can we impact? How can we plug them in? Like, what can they offer us? All that. And that's something that the metaverse can never replicate. Like this is a way I just experienced this. So what else I did this weekend was then last night, Jessica and I, to celebrate our 1 year anniversary of being married, we went to the best restaurant in the city. Like I literally Googled best restaurant in Minneapolis, but it took us like a month to get a reservation, and there was only like one slot. So I see why it was so elite.
So you planned this out.
Yeah. In real.
You didn't just get the reservation like last week.
Right. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
crazy,
It was like a month ago, because I was looking at it. I was like, yeah, we should do something to celebrate our 1 year anniversary. And I was like, what would be the best restaurant we could go to? And I looked it up. Then I passed it on to Jess. She did all the fine-tuned details. And you could not replicate that shit in the metaverse. People will try, right? It's 12-course meal, like amazing ambiance, everything. I don't care who you are. There's no metaverse version of that where you actually know what you're doing. Like you're eating real food with real people, enjoying
also
real company.
It's real food that you're eating.
Yeah, exactly.
That cannot be replicated.
Exactly.
Unless they have some kind of tube that's hooked up to you, and like when you're in the metaverse, it's like sending like food into you, and it's like the lengths to which we will go to simulate something we could just have for real.
Right. And that's throughout like multiple times throughout the meal, Jessica and I were talking about it. We were like, wow, like we should come here for sure. Like at some point we'll be at the point where we could go there once a quarter, but we want to like bring our friends here. And then we're like, why isn't this on multiple street corners here where everyone can have this type of experience? Right. So, because that's really when we talk about best for all, like that was the best in terms of food, and that should be available for everyone.
I saw you said it was a 12-course meal.
Yeah, it was elite.
Like talk about the actual thing. I'm curious, like what the actual.
I realized I keep joking with Drake about this because Drake's a foodie, and I tell him, I was like, can you please recommend the best like 2 books to me so I can get them and I can put all that vocabulary in TechnoTutor, because I can tell my vocabulary of food is not very robust. I'm like using the word like amazing over and over. But yeah, it was a really cool concept. There was a table. It was like a 3-sided table, and everyone's looking in. And then in the middle, you have the chefs, and they're all like preparing the meals and everything. And so it was one of those places where you get a bunch of different little plates each round. And it was actually like perfect amount every time. I don't think I could have handled any more. But it started with they made a drink too with every single part. So we had like 8 or 10 drinks as well, and we don't drink alcohol, so it ended up being amazing because I was so present. I was looking at some people around us where they're getting like a half a glass of wine with everything. I was like, that doesn't even sound fun. Like I would black out halfway through the meal. Like, what is the point of that? So, but yeah, I mean, we had this like soup that had potato skin stock in it, and they had just all this ridiculous like flavor combinations of like kale and kohlrabi, and then they throw like some leeks in there and like shit. I didn't even know half the stuff I was eating, but then the way they present it to you too, you could just tell they had that charisma. They like, you could tell they had a very good filtering process for who was delivering the food. But some of the best stuff had this like squid tortellini thing. I'm gonna butcher some of the stuff, but one of it was the song in Christmas time, it's like partridge in a pear tree. So they literally had partridge, which is a bird, and then like this pear apple thing on the side with this pear drink, and it was like so damn good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where do you even get a partridge?
I have no idea. And so their motto is they get as much stuff as they can locally from around Minnesota. And then if they can't get it locally, they're getting it from the best places in the world. So they had, because like Jess and I don't drink, so they had all these different, it was like a wine, but there was no alcohol. It was just fermented tea. So they had one from Denmark, and that was like some of the best stuff I ever drank. And then the main course was this veal thing with this like parsley juice thing, and there was this fish too where they like made the fish and then they took all the bones out of the fish and then boiled down the fish bones into this like juice thing broth and then coated it on it was so damn good. Wow. I don't know how they do it, but I was just watching them, and the guy's like, you can tell he loves what he does, because if I was back there I would be miserable, because I don't like doing that kind of stuff. I'm content eating like, I have like my 3 meals I can make, but Jess does all the cooking. But if she's ever like can't cook, but it was quite the experience. And then for dessert they had this pistachio nougat thing, and some other thing of like a cashew butter kiwi thing, and then there was like 3 rounds of dessert. Yeah,
I was looking at the pictures you posted, some of them, and like there was something that looks I don't see it now, but it was like it was on a piece of metal. If you remember the picture I'm talking about.
A piece of metal.
Maybe it's just like a part of the table that you had set it on.
Oh yeah. It's some truffle mushroom.
That was truffle. They looked like truffle. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not a truffle expert, but I know a lot of people are into that. And it's apparently like dogs or pigs have to dig through the ground to find them because they're like 5 feet under the ground or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they shaved that on different parts of the meals. And I had some caviar thing too. It's all coming back to me now. It was like, I've never been to something like Burning Man, but I can imagine it was kind of almost like this psychedelic experience where it was like amazing after amazing after amazing, and it kept getting better. I'm like, this is so cool because it's just real. Like no chemical inducedness at all, no anything. It's just literally, I just made enough money, we planned ahead, and this is like our way of celebrating. It was awesome. We didn't have our phones out. We weren't trying to take pictures of everything. I took like 4 pictures, and just so I could remember it. And that was showing me the benefit of specifically what we're doing with TechnoTutor and everything, is because 1, made a bunch of money last year. 2, we have a network. And so now, like, when we're there, we're meeting with other people and we have stuff to actually talk about. Like, we met this couple, this one guy across from us looked like Bill Gates. Shout out to, like, a young Bill Gates, and like kind of a nerd, but he looked kind of ruthless too. He's hilarious. Like, we chatted with him for a while too. So we're out doing these experiences not just because I want to have this amazing meal. Of course, I like amazing food, but it's also getting even more involved in what's going on in the city, and then now being able to relate to people on even a deeper level, because where we're headed and where we're taking everything is to be at the highest level of influence in the city. So it only makes sense. So again, that's why we're doing it. We're not doing it just to go have a frolicking time. It's because it's a way to celebrate, right, everything we've done, and also to keep then building and building. So yeah.
You know, I was thinking too, like your point about you know, it's real, like you're having a real experience, a real physical actual experience, you know, and that you can't have that in the metaverse. The perfect proof of that is like, who is the people that are behind it, right? Remember, like this whole thing with Facebook launching it, right?
Mhm.
And I just saw, like, recently on somewhere on some news thing, Mark Zuckerberg just bought like another 100 acres or whatever it was, whatever amount, like in Hawaii, to expand his, like, I mean, how much does the guy, I was gonna look it up. How much land does Zuckerberg own in Hawaii? Let's see what it says. 600 acres, right? And so they've nearly doubled what they had before recently, and they spent $53 million.
Wow.
They own over 2 square miles of pristine land, whatever that means, on Hawaii, on the Hawaiian island of Kauai. So hold on, they bought 600. I wonder if that, now they have 12. Okay, yeah, now they have 1,300 acres. So they just bought 600. So now they've basically doubled it. So they own 1,300 acres. Okay.
Yeah.
And wow, check this out. I'm just gonna read this sentence. The land was purchased through Le Pauli LLC, which is registered in Delaware and tied to an LLC in San Francisco, Square 7 Management. That company is controlled by Iconic Capital, an investment firm that specializes in advising tech executives, including Mr. Zuckerberg. like amazing, right?
Yeah. That's the game right there.
He's worth $117 billion.
Does he have a kid?
Right? I don't think so. Oh, but he's already, so now they've spent over $150 million just on the land that they own. Okay.
Oh.
So think about this. Like, remember in the little meta reveal that they did, a metaverse reveal, and he was like, you can have any view you want and you can decorate your metaverse the way you want and everything. And it's like this amazing, like, Hawaiian landscape that he's looking at. But what's he doing? If he really was like, no, this is for real, man, the metaverse is where it's at. That's where you want to live, everything. Why would he be buying now over 1,300 acres in Hawaii?
Right. Because he knows
Like,
there's a real world.
So while everybody else is like, oh, I can just have a Hawaiian adventure in my metaverse, like, he's actually buying Hawaii, you know, like, and that's what I was saying the other day. We were talking on something, this point about while everybody is, you know, going to be screwing around in the metaverse, the elite are going to be buying everything up, right?
Yeah.
Which includes us.
Yeah, exactly. And for whoever's listening, like, look at that for yourself, right? And in this upcoming year, what can you do to be part of the elite? Don't see them as outside yourself. Don't see them as superior. It's just people who've figured out enough about how the world works, and then you can buy assets. So then we can use that for what's best.
By the way, I'm sending you in the chat.
Mhm.
Side topic, 2 links. So these are books that
Flavor Bible.
had been recommended to me from someone I had tutored a long time ago, who also was like a assistant chef at a really nice place in Houston or whatever.
Okay.
So those are the 2.
Okay, now I can
Salt, fat, acid, heat,
to that
and then
restaurant.
Flavor Bible.
And now, wow,
Now you can go in there and you can be like, this needs a little bit more cayenne, please. They're like, oh wow, a man of refined taste, sir. Please this way. And they like take you to like the secret room where it's like you get the real.
Oh, I had this foie gras too, which is like duck liver. Yo, that was intense. That was
What do you mean intense?
it was
Like, did they actually make it in front of you? They're like
Yeah,
stuffing
they're
the duck
like
full of like
exactly, and like pulling out the liver, like for you, sir.
they like squeeze it out. And they're like, would you like it directly on the plate or right in your mouth?
Yeah, just like the frosting. Yeah, it was like if you ever it was almost a consistency of like a dense ice cream, but it was definitely not ice cream, you know, freaking duck liver. But it was really good, the stuff it got paired with. Some like cranberry that had this honey like injected into it, and then the stuffing thing. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting these books next week. I'll be like, refined. Yeah. So that's cool. What else? I mean, I just see I see this year for myself, I have way more clarity on the most important numbers to hit. And then that leads into everything else. Like in the past, I used to really focus on money. Like I wanted a certain amount of money this year, but obviously it's like that's stupid. Like don't think like that. So rather, I've just really distilled it down to like I know every day for about 2 hours, you know, Monday through Saturday, exactly what I got to do. As long as I hit these things and track it, keep it growing, it's like that's the foundation. And then that's gonna be so great. Man, 1 year from now, having the basically the 400 distributors of Minnesota that will ever be all in place.
Well, everybody is trying to get to do less in the physical,
Yeah.
you know, and to go into virtual reality. The whole point is to expand into physical reality, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Which one's going to be more fulfilling? Right.
Yeah. Well, the thing I keep coming back to with the metaverse point is if you think that you're limited in this world because somehow physical reality is restrictive or the systems in this world are not designed, which they're not designed to be best for all. But the people who are benefiting most from not changing the nature of the systems are the ones creating the metaverse. Why would you think that that's going to somehow be? And honestly, I don't think people are thinking about it at all. Like they're not. Like they're just, oh, cool, a new shiny object. Let me go over there. You know, it's like a new Marvel movie. They're not. They're just like, oh, cool, thanks. And then they watch it. Like they don't care. They're not thinking about the deeper meaning as to why it's being created.
Or I see some people too, they have linked metaverse with cryptocurrency, and then cryptocurrency in their mind is defined as like it's the way we're going to decentralize all of finance and like get back at the central banks. So it's like the metaverse is kind of symbolic of like unlimited opportunity for this new type of culture where we can like not be centralized. In reality,
Yeah, so they're basically like using crypto to suck everybody into virtual reality.
basically.
Like, good job. Okay, so like, guys, we can be free in this world. They're like, okay, let's just think about this for a second. Okay, it's like, have you seen The Matrix? It's like literally, guys, there's a world made of software in virtual reality where you can be anything you want. It's really amazing. We should all go in there and just live in there. You're literally doing the bidding of the fucking machines. They're like, yes, right this way, humans.
It's like
think about it. What
in our centralized vat of fluid where we're
the cryptocurrency, is it not just powering machines? Like, isn't that how it fundamentally is created? Is like you're powering a machine and that's doing the creation of the cryptocurrency, right? So you're literally creating more advanced computers, more and more and more. And then at a certain point, the computers are going to be like, guys, they're not making any more cryptocurrency. What are we going to do? They're like, oh, well, let's put them into the metaverse and get them to fucking make more cryptocurrencies and all this for this and this and NFTs and everything. So meanwhile, everyone thinks they're just trading baseball cards and shit. And it's like, no, you're not looking at what's physically here and what's required for people. What people actually need to be physically alive. Going into a metaverse, it's like, I was talking to someone the other day and they made this point. They're like 10 years older than me. And they were making this point about how when they were growing up, there was like Atari and like some of these really old school like game consoles. And so they grew up, to a certain degree playing video games. And he was like, but I outgrew all that. And he was like, I see the people in the younger generations are not outgrowing it. And I was like, man, you're so right. Like a lot of these guys, like my age and younger, and that applies to Star Wars, Disney, all these other things. Like they're not outgrowing these points. And so what I see the metaverse, I mean, I understand there's going to be things beyond just entertainment within it. But at the end of the day, it's just entertainment. Because especially for those who are sucked in it, because it's not physically real. For those who are creating it and managing it and so forth, it's like a way of making money so they can do stuff in the physical world.
Right.
But for the average consumer, it's just going to be a way to be sucked into something. And so imagine the level at which they can create, like a Star Wars fantasy world where you can just like 24/7 be a Jedi. Like people are going to get sucked into that and never come out. And there's this anime I watched a long time ago called Sword Art Online. Have you ever seen that one? And it's about this video game that was created and people are playing it and it's like a virtual reality sort of thing. And then at a certain point, like you can't get out of it. You can't leave it. It's kind of similar to Otherland, that book series. But then if you die in there, you die in real life.
Okay.
And so it was like, I don't know, I can't remember if it was like a glitch that occurred or someone trapped everybody in it or something like that. So now everyone is kind of like fighting for survival in this game. Yeah. And it's like and people are actually trying to kill each other and like take control of it and everything, right? So.
It's oddly similar in the Destiny material where it's like the beings will get trapped. It like I'm on almost day 300 of Heaven's Journey to Life. And it's really interesting to just consider like this idea of heaven, right? Where it's like you can have anything you want and it's amazing and all that. But then that's like what the metaverse is representing here in our physical reality.
We're literally doing it again.
Yeah. We're to the point
We're literally doing it again.
The beings get trapped in it because they're powering some greater thing. And then it's like they're actually stuck. And then the point is we're here to then question it and say, look, do you actually give a fuck about life or or just your own self-interest? And then you have the decision to make. So
this is the real point to consider, especially for those, when you consider the future, like children, right? Is Mark Zuckerberg and all these people going to create this big advanced system and then not want you to spend all your time in it?
Right, of course.
They're going to want you to spend so they're going to create systems within it to make you want to stay there. And to take advantage. So if you're not giving your children the ability of discernment through vocabulary to realize, okay, maybe you can go have a meeting in the metaverse, just like we're doing a meeting on Zoom or a podcast on Zoom. Like we can utilize technology. It's not like we're saying, oh, destroy all the computers or something. You can utilize these things and there can be some value and benefit to it. Like I think it'd be cool to be in a meeting and somebody can't physically be there and then they can be like a holographic projection. Sounds kind of cool. But when you're like, I'm going to eschew reality, physical reality to just be in there. Right. The problem is you don't control. It's like with my physical body, if I have a high vocabulary, I can say whatever I want to say in physical reality. I can vibrate the air molecules and say what I want to say. I can physically move my body. And when you have money and you have a high vocabulary, you're not limited physically, right? But when you're in a virtual world where you didn't create it, they could literally just filter you.
Right.
It's like, think about the shadow banning that goes on.
Right.
Like imagine you're walking around and in this virtual reality and everyone you interact with, like 99% is not even real.
Right.
But it gives you the illusion that it's real. So you never know, like, oh, no one's fucking listening to what you're saying. You're just on mute for most people.
Or they're like intentionally replacing your words. Cameron's like, do what's best for all. And then they're like, worse for all. Do what's worse for all.
Yeah, don't do what's best. Yeah, exactly. Right. That reminds me of this funny thing. Like last night, I was laying in bed with Seneca. So like Max and Seneca have these two separate beds. And I was laying there and it's like, I'll lay with one of them and then I'll go and lay with the other one and kind of go back and forth sometimes. Sometimes I'll just lay with one of them and the other one's okay with that or whatever. But sometimes they want me to each lay with them. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna lay with you, Seneca, for a little bit. And then I'm gonna go lay down with Max and then I'll switch back and forth. And like Max was trying to convince Seneca, because like he really wanted me to lay down in his bed, but I could see Seneca really was tired. She needed me to be there to like support her to fall asleep. So I was trying to explain to him once she falls asleep, I'll come and lay in your bed with you and we can, read or whatever. And so he's laying in bed, but he really wants me to come over. And he's like, hey, Seneca. He's like, you could hear him like just talking over there. He's like, Seneca, are you still asleep? Are you still awake? And she'll be like, yeah. And then he'll be like, I know a way that, because at first he was like, can Cameron come lay in my bed? And she was like, no, I want someone who's a big person to lay in my bed with me. Right. That's the way she was saying it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was like, I know a way that you can have a big person lay in your bed or sleep with you, but also Cameron can come into my bed. And she was like, how? And he goes, you can go and lay down with Katie in her bed. Because Katie was like laying in our bed,
Mm.
And what was I going to say? Oh yeah. So then, but she was like, no, I want Cameron to be in here, whatever. And then there was a certain point where Max was like, well, Seneca, because he's like learning how to sell, right? He goes, Seneca, you want to do what's best, right? And she goes, yeah. And he goes, well, don't you want to do what's best and not just what you feel like you want to do? And she was like, yeah. And he goes, well, I know right now you feel like you want Cameron to be in your bed, but it would be best if you go and lay down with Katie in her bed, and then you'll have a big person laying down with you. And he was like trying to like find every way to like sell her on the point, And anyways, it just made me think about that, because he was like, you want to do what's best, don't you? But like that's how the kids talk to each other.
Amazing.
You know what I mean? Like they'll tell each other like that's not best, or like Max was saying something and then Seneca goes, Max, that doesn't make sense.
Mm.
Like that's how they communicate with each other, right? So
Wow.
anyways, that was funny.
That's really cool. Because we were looking at this the other day of how in the next year there's likely going to be like 10 couples at least in the TT network that's like actively like building their family now, like either getting married and having kids, or they're already married and then having kids.
In that process.
Now that's going to be that's going to be a force to be reckoned with, like when all those are together. And
and then when they start to get a little bit older, they start doing their own podcasts and things like that, right?
And they'll be able to sell all that younger. Oh, here's a really interesting thing too. I went to this other event yesterday, Seth and I did. It was more like the spiritual thing, but there's some people in there that are like business owners and they're just looking for answers. So we go there because I found some great people who got involved with Techno Tutor for a minute. And so we're chatting with them, and there's it was like, I've heard this a few times now, this younger generation, kind of the teenage age, whatever you call it, like 16 to 18. They were saying they're like, some of them have kids or stepkids that are of that age. They're like, it's terrifying that how like apathetic they are. Like they don't have emotion. They don't have any sort of like, not that they don't have emotion, but they just don't care about other people. Again, I'm getting secondhand information from these people.
I know what you mean though. Like it kind of an image in my mind is Billie Eilish.
Yeah.
You ever seen that? Like I don't listen to her music or anything, but it's like when I see pictures of her, she's just like, I can't even do it. It's like her face is like, so like.
Right. It's like she's on Xanax or something and doesn't care about anything except how she feels. And then she might write songs about it that then influence this younger generation, which is exactly what's happening. So that was really interesting, because then I was thinking about that. I was like, okay, problem. And then I was like looking at then us having kids and the whole systems we're building and how it's almost like a sandwich, right? So we have us in our generation, and then we have a second wave of kids. So we're able to then like sandwich these people and then infiltrate from top down and bottom up to just explain like, look, do you want to live in this world where no one gives a fuck, or do you want to actually create an awesome life in reality? So problem, solution, reward. And then I mean,
if you think about it, like what purpose do kids have now growing up? Because It's not that people had again, it's not let's go back to the way things were. What purpose did people have before? They didn't have any real purpose, but
Right.
they were directed into a purpose. So the whole story was you would go to college, get a job, or before then, like, and like my parents or young people older than my parents, my grandparents, is like, you would go and you would get a job and you get a pension, or I don't know, whatever the story was. There was some story about here's what you do with your life. You get married, you do this, you do that, and so forth, right? But that has broken down now because they're telling everybody don't have kids, because of climate change, apparently.
Yeah, climate is gonna implode. The world is full of evil, racist people.
Yeah, basically be afraid of everybody. You can't have any friends. You can't go physically and do anything. And getting a job or going to college, everyone knows they're going to fucking get you a job, right? And what jobs are they going to be? I mean, think about it. Like, they're not fucking training people to be metaverse engineers, and without vocabulary, no one's gonna be able to do that anyways. So children it's just, they're not growing up with those things already set. So there's just nothing.
Right. Or it's like become an influencer. That's another thing I see.
Right. And so like, let's say you're a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old, and now you're just stuck at home. And like, what are you supposed to do? You're just on TikTok watching other people like make funny videos. Like, that's it. That's your whole life. You know what I mean? Like, remember when I was, let's say, not growing up, but like the way I would approach media, like social media or like memes and stuff, it's like when you're bored, maybe you would do that stuff. Mm-hmm. But that's like what kids do now. It's not just when you're bored. It's like you're just killing some time having, entertaining yourself for a moment. It's like, that's your whole life. Right. It's just watching TikTok, and then when you realize that those things are artificially through the algorithms designed to influence those children with certain ways of thinking, certain behaviors, certain buying patterns, and so forth. So they're just thinking of it passively as like, oh, it's just entertainment for myself. Mm-hmm. Whereas the people who are controlling it, they're not thinking of it like that. Any more than the metaverse is going to be free and open. Like, give me a break. It's you don't spend all that money and build all that infrastructure and then just go, here you go, have fun. Like, yeah, right. You know what I mean? It's already built in controls, and they've already perfected it, and they've already seen how people respond to being censored and so forth. They've already tested it all out. There's not going to be some free for all. You're in the crypto world. Like, I mean, show me one crypto person who's fucking living freely right now anyways, with their crypto. They're just fucking just like anybody else. And again, no one can answer the question of how does everyone become millionaires in crypto? How does literally every person on the planet become a millionaire? I don't see how it works. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, you just suddenly one day you wake up and everyone has $1 million. How did you create that value?
Right. And how are the laws, like how are the politicians going to then also like react to that?
Katie has a really interesting theory. I don't know if she's the one who came up with the theory, but she's telling me about this, that she thinks they're going to run Rick DeSantis as governor or as president, because he will be the one that will suck everybody into cryptocurrency, like as an established mainstream point. Because apparently he's very pro cryptocurrency.
Really?
Yeah, and like apparently Miami, you have to look at all the details of it because I'm just hearing this from her. But like Miami now has like Bitcoin is like ubiquitous in Miami, or like you can use it anywhere. I don't know the details, but
interesting.
It's like the first city that's really adopting this stuff or something like that. And so apparently he's very pro crypto. And so she was telling me like she thinks that, they're going to basically use him as a way of being the foil to the Democrats, but then sucking everyone into cryptocurrency, which is how they're going to get everybody into the metaverse, right? Because imagine you're in the metaverse and like you're just able to look at something and just be like, yeah, I want that. And then the cryptocurrency like makes the transaction happen in real time and so forth, right? Wow. It's the only way that can work. Right. You can't be like, oh, wait, hold on. Let me take off my goggles and get my wallet out and type it into a website. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to work like that. So it has to be like real time,
Wow. Yeah. I mean, El Salvador was the first nation to adopt as their currency is Bitcoin. They have a young.
It's like the El Salvador's currency is Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah. Nayib Bukele is the
what
president. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's amazing because overnight they become the freest country in the world.
Yeah, man.
Like
Everyone
everybody's
gets
just
thriving.
thriving. Children are just getting all their proper nutrition. It's pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah.
There's no more poverty.
Yeah.
So they adopted it as their official currency, and then they gave everybody money, right?
Yeah.
There's no more poverty.
I don't know. I thought that one Owen Benjamin thing, Katie had sent that of how that story of the monkeys. Remember the guy who did you ever hear that one? The guy who
Remind me, I don't remember.
and he's offering. So I'll just tell the story. I'll just tell it quick. So a guy comes to town and he's like telling all these villagers, he says, I will buy all of your monkeys for $100. And so he has these people running out, they're getting monkeys, right? And then next day he comes back, he says, no, I'm gonna buy all your monkeys for $200. People are like telling their friends, like, yo, let's go get the monkeys, right? Next day he comes back, $500. I'll buy all your monkeys, $500. Now they're basically almost running out of monkeys, right? But he's getting the monkeys, he's giving them each $500, right? They're all making all this money, they're loving it. He says, okay, I got to go out of town, but tomorrow my employee is going to come and he's going to pay $700 for each monkey. Okay. And so then the next day, the guy comes to town, right? They get the last of the monkeys, right? And they sell them, right? So they'll make $700, all the villagers, and then the employer has all the monkeys. He says, okay, next week we're going to come back. How does it go? He goes, next week, my boss is coming back and he's going to be spending $1,000 for these monkeys. So who wants monkeys right now when they're cheap for 700, right? And then so all these people then buy all the monkeys back for 700 a piece because they're going to then sell them, next week, theoretically, for $1,000 a piece. And then a week later, no one comes back. So then they're all broke.
So they just sucked all the money out.
Exactly. And that's potentially.
For those of you who couldn't get it, the monkeys are the crypto. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. That's because there's groups of people who like the crypto whales where they connect and they've done this before, right? And at a certain point in time, they sell their crypto, right? And it has they're like a market maker, right? So they're really the ones calling the shots. So right now everyone's all hyped because Bitcoin keeps going up and Ethereum and all this stuff. But are you in the room calling the shots with them?
See, but what doesn't make sense to me about it is, okay, let's just say today, all US dollars, all currency except Bitcoin vanished. How much is cryptocurrency worth? Like, how much is your Bitcoin worth?
Well,
it's only in relation to a currently accepted point. And so then it would suddenly be like, oh, but then everybody would set their own values for everything. And I'm like, okay, so what about the guy who has very little Bitcoin?
Mm-hmm.
What is he going to do? He's going to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it any different than any other system that we have, except for the fact that it's very fast, instantaneous transactions, all that kind of stuff, decentralized. See, the decentralization part doesn't matter because centralization is not the problem. I mean, think about it. You say like, okay, the problem is all these banks, they control everything and all these companies control everything. But why is it that people participate in it? Why don't people just go and be like, no, I'm just not going to shop at Walmart. I'm going to make my own fucking, chest of drawers or something, or whatever the hell you need.
Yeah.
I'll just make my own company that sells vacuums because you can't, because you don't fucking know how to do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's not to say that that hasn't been an accumulation that has gotten us to that point.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, decentralizing everything, like think about the guy who literally just worked at Burger King his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
How is that guy going to participate in this free and open, like Bitcoin world where everything, like, what is he going to do? Where does he even get the money to buy the cryptocurrency in the first place? And is he paid in Bitcoin? Maybe that's how he gets it. But what is he paid for doing what?
Mm-hmm.
And who decides on him getting any? Is he just going to continue going to work at Burger King and getting paid in Bitcoin? But if that was the case, wouldn't Burger King have to go along with it? What if Burger King, like, here's my point. This idea that like everyone's going to have all this money and then you can do whatever you want, meaning you can't control who gets paid what and all this stuff, right? So you can basically do whatever you want with the money. But okay, like for example, let's say I'm a carpenter and I'm like, well, I'm going to make these really awesome beds, and you need a bed, so you can give me some of your Bitcoin and I'll give you the bed, and no one can stop me. Okay, cool. But whatever somebody who doesn't know how to make anything, whatever somebody who literally just has to work at Burger King to survive, what do you do to get Bitcoin other than work at Burger King?
Right.
And the vast majority of people in this world do not know how to do anything. They all work for big major companies, and the pandemic has accelerated that.
Yep.
So like, what is that person supposed to do if they have to work for a company and all the big companies get together and go, we're not going to allow a system where everyone's free based on Bitcoin, and we're just not going to pay people in Bitcoin. So then they're going to have to take the money they are paid and go buy Bitcoin, but they're only getting fucking wages from Burger King. So it's not like they're going to be rich in Bitcoin. They're still just going to be getting money from Burger King and having that much money. Do you see my point? It doesn't.
Yeah, I see it.
Decentralizing it is not the solution, because people are not educated to live in a decentralized world. If they were, then we wouldn't have one. We wouldn't have a centralized point. The reason why the world is like that is because people are fucking dumb. Not everyone is educated at the same level as the centralizers. That's the problem.
Right.
Why so much is invested on entertainment and media designed to keep people dysfunctional and stupid.
Right. That's the real thing too. Decentralized would be that basically the elite level of vocabulary, the elite programming. Because then if
how many people are all into decentralization through Bitcoin and still believe in God?
Exactly.
Or energy or source or some fucking higher power?
Right.
You haven't even decentralized authority in your mind.
True.
And they think they have.
Right. Right. So question everything. Right. Question everything. And then really, like, how do I say this? If you're listening to these podcasts and you're not if you're not actively out there building a business, right? Because I love how Asif says this. He says business is the realization of purpose. It's like the vehicle of purpose. It's how you express your purpose in the world is through business. And if you don't have a business of doing this, which is distributing TechnoTutor, right? Creating a name for yourself, creating a brand, creating a clubhouse, all of that. If you're not doing that and applying yourself in that every day, like what the fuck are you doing? Because in case you haven't noticed, we're accelerating toward the metaverse, right? Zuckerberg ain't slowing down on buying up property. BlackRock ain't slowing down on buying up property, farmland, whatever. So are you going to accelerate into their reality, or are you going to accelerate with us into the new year, right? And really establish the systems, right? Because again, we don't need everybody, but we need a minority, strong enough minority where we're then able to step up and have these systems. And really that is the system, is go around, meet people, talk to people, sell people, and then bring them into this, show them the principles, show them the tools, have them take it up for themselves. It's not that hard, but like you got to actually like desire it. And
well, you have to let go of all the things that you think are important because you didn't realize you just got sold on it by the system in order to keep you and everyone else disempowered. And so what we're promoting is what people actually want, whether they realize it or not. Like family, actual purpose, stability, all those points that people actually desire. What people want is not actually to just entertain themselves. That point you said about the teenagers being really apathetic, that's just what people are like. The average person is like when you remove all the entertainment of any and remove any sense of purpose. Like before, people had like, oh, they could become an Astros fan or a fucking like Star Wars collector or whatever.
Right.
And we're just pushing that point to the point where people are seeing no value in any of that stuff, but they still don't have anything to do. So they're just like, fucking, I'll just sit and like watch TikTok all day and I'll just be entertained. But what that apathy you're seeing is the apathy that is within everyone. You see what I mean? Like the guy who's fucking obsessed with being a Phillies fan, and that's what his whole purpose when he's not at work is being a Phillies fan, is actually apathetic because he's not creating anything, because life does not want to just fucking sit and be a Phillies fan. Do you know what I mean? That's a program.
Yeah.
That's like a company sold somebody on like being a loyal customer. That's all it is. So that apathy is actually within everybody. We can't go like, oh, it's these new generations are so apathetic. It's like, look at the fucking world that they're inheriting. And
Right.
teenagers generally, they can see patterns. They can see, I see what's going on here. Like I see the hypocrisy in what you're saying versus what you're doing, and what you're saying is important versus what's obviously important in this world. Right. So what else can I say? I guess that's it. Huh? This I think our podcast is going to evolve into just basically 2 points: talking about dystopia and bashing Bitcoin. We should have like a weekly like Bitcoin bash.
Yeah, man, because that gets people triggered because they pour so much of their energy and like belief into it, and then when you threaten it, right, it threatens their whole ego. But right, that alone, like the fact that you react to that, should show you like you've been programmed. Like that's
just
actually you.
just look at it for yourself. Like, have you become more or less isolated? Has your community grown or has it shrink? And I don't mean online community. I mean like your actual physical community of people that you really are close to and know very well. Has that grown or diminished? Right? Because if it hasn't grown, that should tell you something.
Right. That's the real value. Well, it's I say the real value in it is the size of the community that you have of people that are actually aligned in purpose, and then the size of your vocabulary. And you know that by what you're actually doing. Not just because you think you know a lot of words, but that you can actually do more. Like you can take on more responsibility. You can influence others to do the same. You know, those are the two metrics, you know. And of course, money, you know, money comes from that. I'm not saying everyone here should be fucking poor. You know, but you need the understanding to make the money. And also with Bitcoin, there's no real new understanding you need. You just need a little vocabulary so you can set up a wallet or whatever. And then it's like playing.
Well, I mean, exactly. You're just playing a market. It goes up, you buy it. It goes down, you buy it. You know, whatever the fuck you're doing. Like it's just a game, and it doesn't include everybody. And at a certain point, you're gonna have to give it all up, right, for everybody to have everything equally. But I don't think that's the point of it. Right? It's just a magic wish fulfillment, and it's like, you know what? Also, it plays into this like I understand technology. You know what I mean? Like I like understand technology and like this future of technology and all this stuff, and it's like you kind of feel like you're an intellectual somehow because you understand it. And it's like give me a break. All right, let's see. Do you want to wrap it up? We're at my hour. At my
yeah. I just wonder as well with people who are into Bitcoin and stuff, like how many thoughts throughout the day are they like worried about it? Like, I just got to check it quick. It's like you have enslaved your one most precious resource, which is your life. You've enslaved it to a number on a screen. And let's say it goes up a ton. Are you going to pull out the money and go do something with it? Or are you going to be like, oh, I need more, right? Just playing this whole greed thing.
And just hoping, and also just hoping one day everyone adopts it. And then it's like, suddenly we're all free. And it's like, but again, you didn't have to change.
Right.
You didn't have to change any of that programming from the first 7 years, except for your vocabulary around Bitcoin technology. And no one else had to change either. That doesn't suddenly become an equal world just because the nature of the currency and how transactions are processed has changed.
Right.
That doesn't change people's first 7 years.
Yeah. The government's still going to get more tyrannical, like all the shit.
But Mitch, but you won't have to wear a mask in the metaverse.
People will still probably wear a fucking mask in their home.
They're probably going to make you get a vaccine to get in there.
Exactly. We haven't even got into the cyber pandemic, but that'll be next week. All right. Yeah, I think that's good for today.
Yeah. And we'll see. Maybe next week we'll have Drake and Asif back.
Yeah.
They're on hiatus. Asif is going to Dominican, I think. So he'll be back soon.
Hey, cool. All
All
right.
right. Oh yeah, like and subscribe and all that stuff.
Yeah,
And
comment.
share it.
Leave some comments. Up vote, down vote. I'll do both. All right.
Just
Oh, and join the Facebook group and come on the calls.
Yeah.